What's going on, people? Georgio Savvides here, founder of the Hip Hop Orchestra, as well as the host of the Hip Hop Orchestra Presents podcast. And I got a really exciting announcement to finally make with everyone, is that we have our very first official sponsor for the podcast. Now, they are an amazing company called Eldon's Vault, who are extremely dedicated in bringing you the very best in officially licensed merchandise from pop culture. And when I mean the very best, I mean the very best. They provide things like keyrings, caps, t-shirts, to Funko Pops, to statues from all over, such as DC, Marvel, Disney, The Mandalorian, Harry Potter, music artists from all over the place, and they are ridiculously good. I've got a couple of things to show you on offer at the moment. This trust with their stuff is amazing. So, t-shirts, like I mentioned, like the one I'm wearing right now. It's got Rocky right here, which I absolutely love. Or, like I said, also got Funko Pops as well, 3.75 inches and 10 inches. I've got a couple of 10 inches right here for you. I've got Post Malone right here, and I've also got Biggie right here, who I absolutely love. These are so sick. Eldon's Vault, trust me, they are amazing. Now, I'm going to leave the link below in the video right here, and also in the description below as well in all future videos from the podcast. But trust me, Eldon's Vault are amazing. Website is www.eldonsvault.co.uk. Get in touch with them now and start buying ASAP. But also, before I forget as well, I just want to say the biggest thank you to Eldon's Vault for sponsoring the podcast. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you. And trust me, get in touch with them right now. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And peace. What's going on, people? Welcome to another brand new edition of the podcast. And today we're joined by a truly amazing musician and guest today, Mr. Dominic Ferris. How are you, sir? You okay?
I'm very well, Georgia. How are you?
Not too bad, thank you. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast. How's things? Okay?
Fine, yeah. Just as I say, you know, in the room that has served as my hub for the last however long lockdown has been.
Yeah.
but yeah, all good, all very good.
I mean, how has lockdown been for you? You've been okay this past year or so?
Yeah, I mean, you know, as I'm sure many of your other sort of guests have said, you know, through your podcast. I mean, it's the live world was taken away from us at a moment's notice, and I think it's really been a challenge and actually quite a positive exercise in a way to sort of refocus your energy into different areas of productivity. Recording has thankfully been, you know, sort of continuing through lockdown, and I've been involved with various projects over the last year, which have been great. But I think most of the time, I mean, you know, we're used to work always being there. We're used to live shows. We're used to recordings, and we've just had to rechannel our energy, refocus our energy really into, you know, into making it a more productive time.
Definitely. But I love your piano requests that you've been doing this past year. So they're brilliant. I love them. I mean, how did that all come about? Because they're fantastic and doing really well. How did it all come about originally?
Oh, so the live requests thing. Well, actually, way back, like 5 years ago or something, I used to do a thing called Guess the Tune. This is before there was live Facebook and live Instagram. So I did a Guess the Tune. I recorded some tunes, put it up, and people had to guess the things. But as soon as the live Facebook and Instagram became available, I sort of started toying with, you know, just putting myself live, and people used to write in and say, "Oh, can you play this? Can you play this?"
Yeah.
And I don't know how I don't really sort of question it. I've always had this ability to, I suppose, you know, have an instant recall with a song, and if I know it, just play it back by being familiar with the melody or being familiar with the chords and what have you. So I started doing it for a bit of fun. This is way before lockdown. Must be 2 or 3 years ago now, and every so often I'd come in here with a glass of wine and say, right, let's have a bit of fun, because it was fun for me, and it was fun for the people, that the interactive nature of requesting and then hearing your song back. So and then when lockdown started, I thought, well, this might be an interesting way to spread a little bit of joy, and that's what we did. We started putting the Facebook Live and the Instagram Live, and particularly in the first lockdown, it was I think it provided a breath of fresh air for a lot of people that suddenly were forced into this different way of life and working from home, and without the normal structure of their day-to-day jobs, whatever that may be. And yeah, I just started it, and it seemed to go down really well. And since then, I've partnered up with lots of different platforms like Classic FM and Radio 2 and Pianist magazine. And when we did that, we always raised money for a charity. So we choose a charity. Most recently, we did one for Official London Theatre, and we raised money for the Theatre Artists Fund, which is for all the actors and musical directors and choreographers and all the people that work in theatre that don't have a job at the moment, because obviously all the theatres are closed. And we raised a lot of money for that, which is great. And that makes it all the more worthwhile for me to do them, when you're raising money for an excellent cause like that. And it's kept me practicing, to be honest, Georgio. I mean, although I enjoy my playing, normally, I think this is true of many professional musicians and many instrumentalists, you very much practice or play for the job in hand. Like if you've got a recording session in a week's time, and the musical director sends you the scores, you'll have a look through, and that is generally what you'll be playing that week. So of course, lockdown for a lot of pianists, it created this massive expanse of time to sit down and write, let's learn some Bach, let's learn some Chopin. But I suppose my way of committing to practice was doing these sort of frequent live request sessions where you never know what's going to come up. So that's it's been nice to keep the brain active, let's say.
So how do you arrange it then? Do you say put dates up and say, okay, I'm doing a performance next Friday, for instance, send you your requests right now so I can learn them, or do you literally do them on the spot as you're playing, literally live?
It's usually done on the spot. I mean, I try not to overthink it. I think if you overthink it, you lose the spontaneity of the show, so it's a very chatty experience. It's I'm playing, but I'm seeing the comments come up live. So I suppose in my subconscious mind is what I'm playing. I'm not really thinking too much about that. It's just sort of happening, I hope. And what's on the screen is what I'm thinking about. So, like if someone requests Bohemian Rhapsody, you'll say, now Sophia in Hull has written in and said, Bohemian Rhapsody, lovely to have you with us today, Sophia. And it's it's all about presentation as well as the playing. So it's got to be a fun experience, and I think the presentation is I try to make it sort of light and fluffy.
And I've watched them. They're absolutely amazing, honestly.
It's so very kind of you.
My pleasure. And how often do you do them? Do you say once a week, every other week, or a couple of times a month? How do you do it?
So I used to do them at the beginning of lockdown. I suppose it was a bit of a novelty. So I did about 3 or 4 a week, and I quickly found that they were quite exhausting. So as we sort of moved, as the monotony of the lockdown, of the novelty of the lockdown wore off, I sort of started doing less. And now I do them. I did one on Mother's Day. I did one on last week on Easter Sunday. So I do one every so often, but I enjoy doing the charity ones. That's what really inspires me, because if I know that we're raising money for a particular cause, particularly in the arts, because I'm very passionate about arts and music education in young people. And I think if there's anything that's sort of geared towards that, or we can raise money to sort of raise awareness in that, then I'm very inclined to get involved. So.
Definitely. And do you do a lot of teaching yourself as well? I'm a teacher myself. Do you do a lot of teaching yourself?
I used to do a lot of teaching, Georgio. I used to do a lot of sort of in the musical theatre domain, and singing for musicals and musical direction and accompaniment as well. And that's a area that I'm very passionate about, because to accompany properly is a real skill in itself, and it's all 90% of it is listening. And you know, it's something that I love to teach, and I love to work with young people on developing their skill in accompaniment, not just for musical theatre, but for all genres, for classical, for pop, and really you know, having the flexibility to go where the artist needs to go. And I think that's something that I want to explore further. And you know, there are lots of, particularly in Europe and in America, you know, there's lots of schools of thought on accompaniment, but I think that some of that is lacking in London. So you know, I try to sort of bring the profile of that to the front wherever possible. But no, I don't really get the chance to do it as much as I'd like anymore. You know, other projects seem to take over, but I love giving back. I love to inspire, and you know, if what I do with, you know, with live requests or with playing or whatever, I think it's very important to have an open door policy, particularly with young people that want to come into the industry and want to learn about how it's done, because there's no better way of learning than actually being a fly on the wall. I mean, there's been a few occasions where, you know, someone that I'm teaching or whatever wants to come into you know, learn how to orchestrate something, or learn how to arrange something, or learn what it's like in a session. And the best thing you could ever say to that person is, well, come into the studio, don't say anything, just watch and learn, and then we'll go out for a coffee afterwards, and you can, you know, ask whatever you want to ask. But you know, and I had those wonderful opportunities when I was younger to sort of go into studios and see how it was done, or sit on the side of a stage, or sit out in the audience during sound check and sort of look at the dialogue and how the whole system works. Because it's not just about, I feel it's not just about your own application. So if I was going to play, let's say, piano for a show in an arena tour or theatre tour, obviously you've got your discipline, which is your piano, and you've got to deliver to the best of your ability, you know, whatever you're doing. However, there's so many other elements around you where it really helps to have a knowledge of that. So for instance, like, you know, if lighting needs some time to do something, or if sound needs some time to perfect this, or if there's a problem with the staging, you know, to have an understanding of all those different departments, but more importantly, how those departments communicate in terms of the way the scheduling works through the day. That really helps, because it gives you a sort of an understanding of what is required. And it's all a balancing act. I think whether you're in a studio or whether you're in a live situation, you know, everybody is there for a different reason, and they all need their time to fulfill whatever tasks they're there to do. So I think it's very important for those other people to understand that, so that it's all like a little family working together.
Definitely. Because I've always felt that being a performer myself, it's just watching how other people work is how I learn best, just by doing it yourself and then watching. That's how I learn best as well. Yeah. But I know that you studied at the Royal College of Music, didn't you, when you were younger as well? How do you find it there when you were younger?
It was great. I mean, it was very interesting. I mean, I was always very interested in 20th century American music. So, you know, I mean, my heroes are the 20th century songbook writers: Gershwin, Jerome Kern, Leonard Bernstein, Cole Porter. You know, and particularly Gershwin. I mean, Gershwin is a composer that I think served so many purposes in terms of his outputs, crossing over so many different genres. And at the Royal College, I was able to have a teacher that really allowed me to explore that relationship that he had with classical influence, but also jazz harmony, and also his applications to, you know, storytelling through music via musical theatre, and shows that he wrote. So they expand. He died so young. I mean, imagine what he could have done if he'd have lived longer. And obviously we know Gershwin for his famous works like Rhapsody in Blue and what have you, but you know, his song catalogue is really, really quite amazing. And the way that he influenced people that followed, and I did an in-depth study on that at the Royal College. But aside from that, obviously, you know, you go through all of your classical foundation. I mean, the first 2 years were very much technical work, on piano, also conducting, and also I did singing as a second study, and that was very interesting as well. A chap named Peter Savage was my singing teacher. Nigel Clayton, who I'm still very, very good friends with to this day, was my piano teacher. And Nigel really understood what I was about in terms of my love for, I suppose, piano music that was slightly outside the box in terms of what everybody else was doing. However, looking back on it now, I can completely appreciate how important it was to spend time, looking at the classical repertoire, your Beethoven sonatas, your Rachmaninoff preludes, and obviously your concerto seasons and all of that. And occasionally, even now, a job will come up with an orchestra where I go and play a concerto or something, and that's really fun because it's not something that happens every day. Certainly in my career, and when that does happen, I really put a lot of time and energy in well, first of all, making sure that I can do a good job of it. I hope I can, but it's really enjoyable. I think the variety of what I was able to explore at the Royal College. Because normally what you find is, like if somebody comes and, I don't know, studies violin, let's say, obviously they'll have their violin lessons. They'll spend time with a lot of orchestras, with chamber music. As a pianist, obviously there's the chamber music avenue, but you don't tend to spend a lot of time in orchestral situations unless you're a soloist. Because generally speaking, piano is not scored for, in an orchestral symphony, so that, I suppose, can make life quite lonely as a piano player, because essentially it's you and your instrument and your practice room. So when you do get the chance to collaborate with, a chamber group, or in a jazz situation, I did some work with the RCM jazz band back in the day, which was great fun. And again, accompanying, was wonderful. I really, really loved it. And I think, I think every good soloist has to have a good experience of other applications, be it chamber music, be it accompaniment, because, I think that's where you learn your craft. You sit in the orchestra or you sit in a chamber situation, when am I leading? When am I sitting back? And I think that is such a great discipline to learn about the balance and the fluidity of the music. And I think when you're there as a student, you don't really realize that you're learning it. I think it's only when you look back and you're in a professional scenario, and then you look back and you thought, oh yeah, I remember that session when we did this, and that, now that's proving useful.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, I mean, Nigel was great. For my final recital at RCM, I played the symphonic dances from West Side Story for two pianos, which was an arrangement by, I think it was John Musto, and it was a really lovely arrangement, and a chap called Elwyn Hendrihanto, which is to this day my very close piano partner in my act, the Piano Brothers, which is my piano later, yeah. And that was the first time we ever collaborated on stage together, and I came out in this red sparkling shirt, and I thought, right, let's make this into a show. And we did that, which was great, actually. I mean, those symphonic dances, it doesn't feature the main songs from West Side Story. It's more the dance music, like the mambo section in the Dance at the Gym near the beginning of the show, the ballet sequence in Act 2. So that was really nice to do that. And then afterwards I played I think it was one of the Chopin ballades, and Brahms. I love playing Brahms. There's a lovely physicality about Brahms that I really enjoy. And then I think I played a very strange contemporary piece called The Wind Hover. I can't really remember how it goes, but I had a great time at RCM. Nothing bad to say about it. Met some lovely people there. Still in touch with a lot of my professors, and yeah, it was great. And also being in the middle of London, I remember going over the road to the Royal Albert Hall, seeing as many shows as I could. Obviously I had a passion and still have a passion for West End musicals, and I remember knocking on doors of please can I sit in the orchestra pit? And having coffees with musical directors, and that's how you learn, that you have to, as I say, watch and see how it's done, and try and aspire to be good enough to be in those situations,
Definitely. And have you always had that love for sort of West End shows and American Songbook growing up?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always loved musicals. I mean, both my parents are, I come from a very musical upbringing. My mum And my mum's parents, in fact, were, they used to tour variety shows all around the UK. And my mum was a singer-songwriter and was involved in musical theatre. My dad was a record producer. He worked
Oh,
at Abbey
wow.
Road with the Beatles.
Nice. Wow.
So yeah, he that's where it all comes from. So I've got the recording influence, the musical theatre influence, and I suppose the classical. And I think that variety and that diversity has been probably the single most important factor that has enabled me to be involved with so many different genres. And I like that way of working. I like the diversity of, going in and, I don't know, playing for a ballet one day and then you're producing a pop record the next week. And, I think that's, it gives you a rounded experience as a musician, I guess. But that's nothing against specializing in a particular field. I've got the utmost respect for anyone that wants to specialize in their instrument, because I think that's, that's a sort of very admirable feat to, spend that much time and at the exclusion almost of any other facets in music. So but I have to say I do like the diverse approach, and in a way that's what I've fallen into. I think you're often led by opportunity, and you're often led by whatever work is there, and it just, I don't know, just very organically it tends to be very very crossover, I'd say. So
Definitely. You must have learned so much as a youngster as well from your parents, with that whole diverse approach to everything.
Yeah, I mean, I was always sort of immersed in different styles of music. I mean, my dad is very much in sort of blues and jazz. He's played in a blues band for the last 20 years, and probably longer than that, actually. And my mum, when I was young, it was playing me sort of Shirley Bassey and a wide variety of what I suppose you could call music with a theatrical slant. I've always been fascinated by storytelling through music. So, if there's a pop song or a crossover song or whatever that takes you on a journey, both musically and narratively, I think that's very exciting. And that's obviously the whole basis of musical theatre. It's your storytelling through song. So I think that's why I was always connected to that style of music,
See, I'm exactly the same as you, but I've always loved that storytelling through music. I've always loved it. And you mentioned Shirley Bassey there, and obviously you worked with her recently, didn't you? What was it like to work with her?
Well, as I say, I mean, I was a fan of Dame Shirley for many years. So I worked closely with a producer called Nick Patrick. We've done a lot of albums together. And most recently, the Dame Shirley Bassey project. And this was recorded in lockdown. So you can imagine the limitations in terms of travel and what have you. And it was great. I mean, I was involved very much from the early stages of that album. And it was fascinating to work with her on a very sort of open level in terms of rehearsal, and it was fascinating to watch and learn from somebody that's had so many years of experience. And again, it was very much an accompanying role, facilitating what she wanted. And I think as you work on various projects, you tend to take away something different from each one. And the Dame Shirley Bassey project was an example of something where I had to sort of collate all my experiences from anything else that I'd done in the past and put them all into one project, because as well as accompanying and as well as sort of understanding the artist, you're also very much reading them as a person. It's very much a sort of relationship of second guessing what's going to happen next, so you'll be playing something, you can hear maybe it's a tone too low. In your mind, you're already thinking, right, in a moment, I could be, we might have to transpose this up a tone, get ready, and you can't be sort of waiting around in those situations. You've got to be, on your game all the time. And that's a skill, I think, that's very important for these situations, in the sense that, you have to learn to be adaptable, I think, and also do it in such a way that the artist is always accommodated and the artist's needs are always being facilitated. And Nick Patrick is absolutely brilliant at that. He's very good at managing a scenario and managing a whole project. I mean, I do not envy his task at all on this, because, you know, just to give you an example, Giorgio, I mean, the orchestra was recorded in Prague, the vocals were recorded in Milan, the piano was done in London at Masterchord. Steve Sidwell, who I know you interviewed the other week, he recorded the brass at Masterchord for a few of the tracks. We routined it down in Monaco, so it was spread out completely, and it was a case of scheduling everything so carefully, so that, you know, every stage of the project was managed very carefully. But also the central Pro Tools session, you know, had to be very carefully documented, because you've got all these audio sources coming in from different places. And I think, you know, it was very important for Nick and Pete Schweer, who engineered the sessions, to be aware of all those different audio sources that were coming in from different studios, from different artists. So, you know, I really take my hat off to Nick that sort of pieced the whole thing together. But it was a fascinating process. I mean, working with Dame Shirley was amazing. I learned so much from the days that we had, and she's very particular about the way in which she works, and you know, not just musically, but also the energy that she emits. And I think the way that she breathes when you're accompanying her, even, you know, tells you so much about what she's about to do next, or the way in which she's going to do something next. And, you know, you can tell if she's feeling a song or if she's not quite feeling a song. And that was fascinating. And it was an amazing learning process, and one that I will always remember. Definitely a career highlight, that one.
Definitely, because when I was reading about how the process of the album actually worked, like you mentioned a minute ago about saying, for instance, the rehearsals took place in Monaco, recording sessions were split between London and Prague. I mean, and obviously vocals recorded in Italy. It just blew my mind about how the whole process came together. I mean, it must have been incredibly difficult. I mean, it's difficult anyway making an album, let alone all these different countries kind of combining to one.
Absolutely. I mean, we were delayed actually quite a lot because we started before the lockdown happened. So we started January last year. We had 2 days of rehearsals in London, and that was the first time the team came together. And we routined various songs. I mean, we must have gone through, oh my gosh, 60 songs for that record.
Wow.
And, you know, sometimes songs got thrown out straight away. Sometimes they were held in a little bit longer because we weren't quite sure. Should we change the key? Should we change the tempo? Let's change the structure of the song. And sometimes that had an influence which allowed the song to stay in the mix a little bit longer. And other songs stayed in from the very start right to the very end. I'm trying to think of an example. I think I Was Here, the Beyonce cover, that we routined on day one, and that made the record. I think there are a couple more. Music Was My First Love, the John Miles number, which is a great song, and she actually she sang that at a Raw Variety show.
Amazing.
The famous Raw Variety show, where oh gosh, Mike Dixon was conducting, and it was the famous show where she had to sing the beginning. It's a very short song. It's just got a verse and a little bit at the end. She went off and changed her gown, and then there was this whole dance sequence on stage, and then the whole cast gathered on stage, and she was meant to come up through this sort of trap door under the stage on this lift, and she just about made it because there was something wrong with the change of her gown.
Oh,
and
really?
It delayed. Yeah, she only had about 2 minutes and 30 seconds or something. And Mike was slowing the music down and slowing it down to give her more time. And she just about made it to come on and sing the last last chorus. So that's a famed Shirley Bassey moment. And she reminded us of that occasion when we did the song.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
but it was great. And I was very much given my own artistic license really to create and arrange my own piano parts. And Rob Mounsey did the orchestral arrangements for the record. And he so what happened was, after we did the routining sessions with Dame Shirley, I then came back to my studio and created the master template for the session, with all the sort of tempo, where we pull up, where we push forward. Of course, it could all be changed again because it's all work in progress. But then I'd record a definitive piano track of what we'd routined, which was true to the structure, the tempo, the key of what we'd agreed in our rehearsal sessions. More often than not, that changed again later down the line, but we had to have that so that we could then send that down to Dame Shirley in Monaco, for her to rehearse to, so that when we came around to our next routining sessions, she was able to familiarize herself with the track, so that she got more familiar the closer we got to her recording sessions. So that was an interesting process, and there was a couple of very intense weeks where Nick and I would be talking several times a day. Do you think this needs to be 1 BPM faster here, or 2 BPM? So it was that intricate in terms of modeling the track. And I understand why that had to be done in this scenario, because of the fact we had so many people recording remotely. But generally speaking, I think that way of recording can be quite restricting. I mean, an artist like Dame Shirley is used to, or certainly was used to back in the day, going into Abbey Road Studio 1 with a live symphony orchestra. The conductor would be there. She'd be standing behind a screen with the mic, and it would be tracked live. Occasionally you might re-overdub the vocal, but it was live. There was no click. It was done live, and that's it. And I think there's a wonderful organic magic that can come out of that style of recording. Sometimes there might be errors. There might be little technical errors. Sometimes something might be a little bit high in the mix, and you can't change it because you've got a spill from another mic, but the take is a magic take. And I think sometimes, I mean, maybe this is a controversial thing to say, I don't know. I think sometimes, recording processes nowadays can be so perfect because you have the technology to do that. So why wouldn't you? But, I think coming from, obviously my dad, reminisces about and romanticizes about tape and analog tape, and, we only had 4 tracks and we had 8 tracks. And, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are amazing masterpieces. In fact, probably the majority of the world's masterpieces have been made on a limited number of tracks on analog magnetic tape. Whereas nowadays there is so much choice and, endless samples, and endless ways you can do things. But at the end of the day, I think it's down to the simplicity and the makeup of the track and the delivery of the artist, and, and just trying to create that magic where you can. And I'd like to think that the Shirley Bassey record does, have those moments of this was a really special moment,
Definitely.
So,
and you've worked on, you've provided orchestrations as well yourself for 6 top 10 albums yourself since 2015, all recorded at Abbey Road Studios. What happened with they actually?
So, we started off, my first record at Abbey Road was back in, 2010, 10, I suppose, not long after I finished college. And that was with Elwyn, with the Piano Brothers. And we went in there and we recorded an EP in there in Studio 2. And we worked with a producer called Yoad Nevo. And we recorded a track called Our Cover of Uprising by Muse. And we went in there and did that. And that was with the London Symphony Orchestra.
Wow.
So that was one of our first experiences there. And then through that project, I met Nick, Patrick, and through an old family friend, actually, Don Reedman, who I do some other work with. And Don was famous for Hooked on Classics and classic rock back in the 80s. And I suppose the album series that brought me into that studio the most was the Elvis Presley and Roy Orbison and Beach Boys projects, where I recorded all the piano tracks and did some of the arrangements, not all of the arrangements. And that was a fascinating process, to go in there and get the multi-tracks of some of these incredible, iconic, pieces of work. I remember doing the arrangement for Good Vibrations for Beach Boys album. And I remember being sent the multi-track of Good Vibrations, and I had it here in my studio. Let's solo the theremin, solo the, and it was, the tracks are masterpieces. Brian Wilson catalog is, genius in itself. But when you dissect it and listen to, oh my goodness, that harmony, he fitted that, and that's bounced over there. And when you listen to the way that he worked with the Wrecking Crew and, some of these incredible session musicians, Carol Kay on bass, and, those cello moments, and, it really is, amazing, absolutely amazing, though, and it's a masterclass in itself. And when that project actually was an interesting one, because taking Elvis as an example, when we did the first Elvis record, those are early Elvis records. Elvis went in, he had his band, and they went in and they put the track down. Of course, they would have rehearsed, certain elements of the track and what they were going to do it in certain places. But it was very much a case of, let's put the track down, this needs this, let's overdub that. And it was an organic process. And the same possibly for a lot of the Roy Orbison records. When we came to do the Beach Boys record, that was very different, because Brian Wilson was so particular about the way that those arrangements were scored and the way that they had to be executed in the recording sessions. And that was a double-edged sword, because somebody asks you to do an arrangement on a track that already has an iconic arrangement. What do you do? It's already so perfect. How could you possibly improve this masterpiece? So I was very, very careful, and Elwyn did this arrangement with me, and we worked on it together. And one of our briefs that we sort of conceived ourselves was, let's always work with the arrangement that's there. Let's not put anything new, because it doesn't need to be there. Let's only enhance. The brief is a symphonic record, so let's enhance the ideas that are there, but make them into sort of more of a symphonic texture. And that's very much what we did in that track. You've got so much to play with, because it's sort of very rhapsodic in its makeup, particularly in that breakdown in the middle, that gotta keep those loving good. So we did the arrangement, but then that was sort of in itself done in a very calculated way. We didn't record the whole orchestra together. We did the brass separately, the strings separately, so that in the mix that gave us that ability to separate. When we did the pianos, that was done in Abbey Road Studio 3, and I think we possibly brought in every keyboard instrument in Abbey Road. We had the old Mrs. Mills piano. We had the new Steinway in there. We had the original Hammond in there as well.
Wow!
And, Hayden Bendel was engineering, and he was in there, and we set it all up, and it was great fun. Great couple of days doing that. Great memories. And again, it was just one of those wonderful projects that comes along once in a while, and you're working on the world's best music, and that doesn't happen very often. But yeah, every time you go into that studio, my dad worked there from 69 to 71, I think, and he was there while Let It Be was recorded, and he did some Hollies sessions there, and that was really back in the day, when in the golden age of the pop output in Britain. And obviously since then, Abbey Road has now become famed for its film scores and all of that sort of thing. But every time you go in there, there's still that element of this is where these iconic records were recorded, so it's never something to be taken for granted.
Definitely. And now I've been Abbey Road once myself, actually, for a little tour around there. I absolutely loved it, man. But for you to actually work there, though, like I said, like working with the original keyboards and the Steinways, what was that like for you to actually work in such an iconic venue?
Oh, it was amazing. Absolutely amazing. The first Piano Brothers record we did was in Studio 2, and we used the original Steinway that's in there. It's got a very harsh, metallic sound, but sometimes you want that on a pop record, to cut.
Yeah.
So you've got the attack right on the front. And we hired in another Steinway from Steinway Hall in London. And we put the two pianos together, and obviously because one was a very bright piano and one was a little bit darker, you could really tell the different personalities of the two pianos. But it was great. We worked with an engineer called Pete Cobbin, was the chief engineer at Abbey Road for a long, long time. He's now gone on to set up his own post-production suite, but still records at Abbey Road from time to time. And then after that, the next job after that I did was the Sochi Winter Olympics. I recorded there, 2013, I think that was. And so I did all the pianos for the soundtrack for the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and that was great fun because that was very very particularly directed. You had this musical supervisor of the Olympic ceremony say, can you play this note just a little bit more like this, and this note has to be like this. And that was very particular because obviously he was imagining what was being seen on screen. He could see the whole opening ceremony in his mind, and obviously we were there. So that was an example of a session where you don't really bring a great deal of artistic ideas to the drawing board. You're very much being directed by the musical supervisor that's there. But for a lot of the other stuff, certainly for the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra collaborations, it would be very much a case of, this is the piano part I've come up with, let's give it a go. And I think, generally speaking, I think a lot of the work that I do is different to a lot of the other piano session pianists around London. I mean, occasionally I'll get in a session where I just have to go in and read a score down and play it. But I would say 80% of the sessions I'm asked to do are sessions where I very much bring my own style into the part. So, I'll get the outline of the part and speak to the producer about the sort of feel that he or she wants to achieve. Do some research into the style of the artist, work with the artist, usually in a routining scenario where you can get to know each other. And I think that's very, very important to have that rehearsal time together so that you can actually understand each other's way of playing and way of performance. And then when you get into the studio, it's very much a case of, tracking lots of takes and, just having that dialogue with the producer and sort of saying, well, look, let's do a slightly more sparse approach on this one, and this one will make it a bit more symphonic. And, and obviously if there's other instruments in the room, if there's a string quintet or something, then you have to know what they're going to do in advance, because they're not going to be improvising. They're going to be reading off a chart. So, it's important to understand all the other elements that are going to be performing around you and how the piano fits into that,
Definitely. And you mentioned about Elwin a few times, actually, that he formed Piano Brothers with, actually.
Yeah.
And was that back in RCM where you met each other originally?
Yeah. So that was a very interesting crossing of paths. I mean, I was studying, as I said earlier, with my teacher, Nigel Clayton. He was studying with his piano professor, Andrew Ball, who was another piano professor at RCM. And he also studied composition for screen, because Elwin's main job is a film composer. He's a very successful film composer based in Indonesia and Singapore. And we met in 2009, I want to say, at the Royal College. And Nigel said to me, you must meet this guy, Elwin. And I didn't know who Elwin was, and thought, who is this Elwin? Why does he keep going on about this guy? And Andrew, his teacher, said, you must meet Dominic Ferris. So, it was almost a sort of meant to be meeting. And the way that it all started, Georgio, is we met for a coffee in the canteen downstairs. And, I was sort of, what do you do? And he said, what do I do? And, we sort of shared each other's interests and passions. And we just said, look, let's book a room, let's get into a practice room and let's have a play and see what happens. And we did. And it turns out that we both had this love for a diverse crossover. Obviously, we both loved our classical, but we both loved the jazz elements of classical. Kapustin, Gershwin, Earl Wild, all of these sort of more adventurous harmonic composers. And then we found that we both had a love for Disney and, the Alan Menken catalog. And, so we improvised. So let's do Circle of Life and The Lion King. Let's do Beauty and the Beast. Let's play some, I Want You Back by Jackson 5. And it was just this incredible energy between us that it had this musical spark, and it still does to this day. And he's one of the few people that I've worked with or have performed with where I can be on stage with him or in a recording studio with him, and I just know what he's going to do, and and he knows what I'm going to do, and it's a very spiritual musical connection. It's not a technical connection. It's a very personable connection. And we both understood early on. I mean, we've been playing for 12 years now, and through that time, we've learned how to play very sympathetically as a duo, keeping out of each other's way, looking at the dynamic of the music. And we've done a lot together now over those years. We've done a lot of arrangements. We've done a lot of performing together. We did a wonderful concert actually a couple of years ago in Malta with the BBC Concert Orchestra.
Wow.
For Friday Night is Music Night. And normally when we do Friday Night is Music Night, it's done in a theatre in London, the Hackney Empire or whatever, and there'd be a theatre audience, and then it would go out on Radio 2 either live or delayed. This one was in a huge sort of open air concert space. There must have been 14 or 15,000 people. It was as I say, with the concert orchestra, and we did our arrangements for The Lion King and The Greatest Showman, which we did the symphonic arrangement for. And we just put a medley together, and Anthony Cherry, who's the producer of Friday Night is Music Night, and it was the first time we'd ever done something like that with the concert orchestra. So there was an enormous element of trust placed in us for that show, and it was unbelievable. I mean, we just had a great time, and that was one of those moments where you sort of feel this incredible energy, not just between you, but coming off the audience, the energy from the orchestra. You're surrounded by this incredible atmosphere. So that was a wonderful moment. But, obviously the lockdown has prevented us, because he lives in Indonesia. So the lockdown has prevented us from seeing each other or doing any concerts, but we're still keeping closely in touch, trying to plan something for when things open.
I definitely, because I see obviously a lot of your performances. They're absolutely incredible, amazing.
That's
I mean, and you mentioned about that kind of connection that you both have. I mean, did that make working together and then composing the pieces a lot easier? Do you feel having that kind of connection together?
Yeah, I mean, I've always sort of adopted the rule that when you're in a working environment, working with somebody, you'd like to assume that whatever is said or whatever is discussed is done for the greater good of whatever project you're working on. It's, nothing is to be taken personally. It's all a case of working together as a team. And sometimes those decisions have to be made very fast, because if you're in a rehearsal situation or a recording session where the clock's ticking and you've got to facilitate a certain job, by the end of that, you've got to move quickly. So our relationship in a work environment is very different to our relationship when we're out having a coffee. And, my relationship with Elwyn is a very interesting one, because outside of the work environment, we're very much like brothers. I mean, we're so close as people. He's a very, very dear friend to me. But in the working environment, it's you switch on, in a way, your sort of firework mentality of let's get the job done as quickly as possible and efficiently as possible, and that energy just flows, and it's a very organic thing, particularly when we compose our own music. He's very influenced by Hans Zimmer, the film composer, and absolutely wonderful catalogue. And as am I, but he, being a film composer, is obviously, that's very much his genre. Whereas I'm very influenced by, what pop aspects and what musical theatre aspects can be twinned with that film, that sort of film narrative in the music. So really it's a combination, we call it a potpourri or a salad of these different musical influences. And I think that's where those interesting combinations sort of meet, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's been a very interesting partnership. And the thing is, I mean, if he lived in London, maybe we would perform more, you know, but generally speaking, when we've got a job to do, I'm very proactive. I'm like, either, right, you know, you're busy, I'll come to you. I'm going to jump on a plane, come to Singapore. We're going to spend 3 weeks, intense work. And by the end of that 3 weeks, we're going to achieve what we need to have achieved. And I think there's a certain element of productivity that comes out of that when you put pressure on yourself to, you know, to say, right, you know, we've got to get this job done. This arrangement needs to be done. That's not to say it can't be changed or tweaked afterwards. But I think, you know, I work very well under pressure and to deadlines. And Elwyn does as well. So we've got that in common. So, you know, we tend to use that approach rather than, oh, this might happen, this might happen.
I'm very much like you, where I work much better under that pressure and deadlines. I feel like I work much better that way. But have you worked, obviously since lockdown, have you done any projects together over the last sort of year or so? Or have you both been so busy that you've had no time?
We've been working on a music education project. I mean, as I said, I'm very passionate about, you know, young people or people of any age really having access to free music education where possible, particularly from places in the world where you wouldn't think that it comes, you know, as easily as, you know, London, New York, LA, Paris, whatever. So yeah, we've been collaborating on a more, I suppose, academic level, you know, looking at ways in which we can collaborate with organizations and charities around the world to, you know, to highlight the need for access to music education. But in terms of our piano playing, he's been very busy with his film work. And, you know, I've been doing various projects, you know, some for the theatre industry, some for more sort of pop orientated things throughout lockdown. But we still speak every week. I mean, it's, you know, it's always a joy to sort of hear what he's been up to and exchange news. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I know you both got endorsed by Steinway as well, my favorite all-time piano. I mean, what was that like to be endorsed by them?
Oh, well, Steinway have been absolutely wonderful to us. I mean, well, I'll tell you how it started. I was asked to play for, it was the royal wedding of William and Kate Middleton back in, was that 2011 or 2012?
Like that, yeah.
And I was asked to play piano for the international press launch at Lancaster House.
Wow.
And it was Steinway that were there as warranty holders, and they provided a Steinway Model D. And, you know, I played many Steinways before that. I mean, most of the pianos at the Royal College are Steinways.
Yeah.
But I met a wonderful gentleman who is still a dear friend to this day called Ulrich Gerhardt, and he is one of the world's finest piano technicians.
Wow.
And he is from Hamburg, of course. And obviously Hamburg is where all the European Steinways are built. And, you know, many times I've had the joy of being toured around the factory and seeing how these pianos are born. You know, it's absolutely wonderful. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But it's amazing how, you know, a piano can never be preconceived. It's you always have to work with what the piano wants to do, and sometimes they, you know, they finish, and some of them want to be a concert piano and they're used on stage at the Royal Albert Hall at the proms. You know, other pianos still as beautiful, but are much darker and more complex in terms of their harmonics and sound. And this piano at Lancaster House was an example of that. It had this beautiful dark and complex color to it, something that you could really feel and get into when you were sort of playing more of the sort of more ballady type, you know, lush, complex textures. And my job was to play music for an hour, solo music. So I played my own arrangements of various West End musicals, Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, and West Side Story, and all that sort of thing. And then I had to accompany some singers. Did all of that. And then Ulrich was there and another chap from Steinway. And I went over to them and said, look, I have to say, I absolutely loved playing your piano today. Thank you so much for bringing it. And they said, we enjoyed your playing. I said, well, that's very kind of you. Next thing, they invited me up to Steinway Hall in Marylebone Lane. And the rest is history, really. I just fell in love with the brand. They seemed to like my style of what I did. And I suppose my different or unique approach, or however you want to put it, in terms of my piano playing. And we've stayed in touch to this day. Generally, whenever there's an event around Europe or around the world where they're launching a new piano or a new model, or if there's a marketing event, generally either I'll be asked to do it as a soloist, or Elwyn and I will perform at it together. And we've done many events now for all sorts of different brands, normally high-end brands of different manufacturers. So, you know, we did one for BMW, Mercedes, and, you know, various brands that are exhibiting their products where they would want a musical luxury product. And the reason I enjoy doing that is because I'm very passionate about the piano.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of artists are very concentrated on their own performance, which is perfectly understandable. But for me, it's always a joint partnership between what I'm wanting to do and how the piano is responding to that. And you know, it's always important to remember that it's the piano that you're showcasing, and not necessarily your performance. And that's why I really enjoy it, because I love sort of performing on different pianos around the world, and meeting different people that come into contact with those instruments.
Definitely. I saw a video of you showcasing the Model D, which is an incredible piano.
Yeah.
It's the biggest piano. It's used mainly everywhere. Stunning piano. I played it before as well, the Model C as well. I just love them so much. Absolutely love them.
Yeah,
and they are. And another part of another duet with Ferris and, is it Milnes? As well?
Ferris and Milnes, yes.
Milnes,
yeah. I always, whenever anyone mentions Ferris and Milnes, I always have to giggle, because it's my fun act. It's, you know, whereas Piano Brothers is, you know, I mean, they're both very serious, and they're you know, they're both things that I enjoy doing. But Ferris and Milnes, I work with a supremely talented performer called Martin Milnes, and he is a wonderful vocalist and a great actor and director. But he has this very unique talent of being able to sing in his falsetto register at pitch.
Yeah.
So he sings all these soprano condensers and hits all these, you know, hugely high notes. And we worked on a production together. I conducted a Christmas show called the Thursford Christmas Spectacular, which takes place in Norfolk every Christmas. And it is the largest Christmas show in Europe. And it is, I mean, you have to be there to know what it's like. It is the most crazy, mad. You have all these feathered dancing girls, like something out the Ziegfeld Follies. And you have a Wurlitzer theatre organ, and, you know, a huge, big orchestra. And it's like going back to the days of Variety. You know, it's that was right down my street, and I had a great time there and enjoyed it very much. And it was a sort of a grueling schedule. We were doing 2 shows a day we did about 80 shows, I think, in total.
Wow.
You know, over the Christmas period. And I met this chap, Martin, and we stayed in touch. He came and performed in some of my piano shows early on as a guest vocalist. And then we developed Ferris and Milnes, and I suppose our calling card has been our mashup medleys, where
I'll get into that, actually.
we take lots of different. I think our first one was 30 Gershwin numbers in 5 minutes, or is it
33? Yeah.
33, is it?
33, yeah.
So long ago. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was going to get into actually for Stephen Sondheim's 85th birthday gala, wasn't it? I saw 33 numbers in 5 minutes. I mean, I was going to get into that. Like, for something so detailed like that, I mean, where the hell do you even begin doing 33 pieces in 5 minutes? Where do you even begin?
Well, I think with someone like Stephen Sondheim, you know, it goes back to like a little bit what I was saying about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. You know, Steve Sondheim has such a calculated idea. Everything is there for a reason, be it the lyric, be it what the melody does while the lyric is happening, the harmonic structure of everything. And that's not to play a disservice to any other composer. But I think that, well, for example, if I was accompanying someone singing a song from Les Mis or Phantom of the Opera or any of those sort of musicals, you'd go in and you'd play. You might embellish certain bits and and sort of support them. With Stephen Sondheim, generally you wouldn't do that. You would play what he intended, because the score was written as he intended it to be written. So in tackling this mashup medley, we were asked to perform, Martin and I, at this gala at Drury Lane, the 85th the birthday gala of Stephen Sondheim. And we had 5 minutes of stage time. That's what they'd allowed us. And I thought, we thought, what are we going to do? What are we going to perform? So we'd done a random mashup medley before, called 20 Songs in 4 Minutes, that had no agenda. That was completely random. We had everything from Puccini to Kate Bush to West Side Story to Supercalifragilistic. Everything was in it. So when we did the Sondheim mashup, Martin is a aficionado of Sondheim, and I appreciate his work very much. So we worked together and we thought, right, well, how can we create a mashup medley, but not just by cutting and pasting? It's got to be structured as a complete piece. So we went about doing that, and it took us about 6 weeks of fairly intense work. And we premiered it, and we played it to the musical director, a guy called Gareth Valentine, hugely talented musician. And we performed it for him, and in the rehearsal a couple of days before. And then we just did it with a piano and us two on the stage, and it was great. We enjoyed it very much, and we were delighted a few weeks later that Stephen Sondheim got in touch with us and said how much he enjoyed the medley. So that was really, really lovely to have that, I suppose, stamp of approval in a way, because you never know when you're doing these things. You think, oh my goodness, should we not be doing this? So that was nice.
I saw you did something similar, didn't you, a couple of years ago for West End Live, which was amazing. How much fun was that today? It looked like a lot of fun to me. How much fun was that?
West End Live was very different, because at the Sondheim Gala, you had a theatre full of people that knew every single word of every Sondheim musical that was ever created. So a room full of aficionados. West End Live, you've got the equivalent, but the first 8 rows in front of the stage are authorities, but on current West End musicals. So generally, you have a crowd of, I don't know, however many people that fit in Trafalgar Square. And you have a big stage at the front, and we go on every year and we do all the West End musicals in usually 7 or 8 minutes. And we have to make sure that we include everything, because every year it changes, because shows close and other shows reopen. So we have to, obviously some pieces get taken out. So I remember we started our first year, we had a lot of Miss Saigon in there. We had a lot of Billy Elliot in there, because all those shows were all shows that were on at that time in the West End. And obviously as they closed, we had to take them out, and then new shows opened. Some shows only stayed for a few months. But obviously you've got your long runners like Phantom and Les Mis and all those things that you can bet are going to be in there every year. So and we do that, and we use like, for instance, in Phantom, the Carlotta cadenza. Martin sings that because he can sing that high. And he tends to take all the girls' parts. I tend to do more of the sort of poppy, Elton-y type stuff at the piano. And all of the first 6 rows are usually teenage musical theatre fans that just absolutely live and breathe musical theatre. And they come in and they, some of them sort of stay for both days, and they camp out in Trafalgar Square, and it's all very intense. And it's amazing. We've done it now for the last... obviously not last year, because they didn't have West End Live, but we've done it for about 5 or 6 years now, I think.
That's incredible. I know you also performed in a place like New York as well, which is amazing. What was that like?
Oh, so that was another mashup. That was Gershwin. That was 30 Gershwin numbers in. You'll probably have to tell me. I don't know how many minutes. But that was at the Lincoln Center, and that was for the, what was it for? The New York Cabaret Convention.
Okay.
And there's a friend of ours over there that runs it, called Katie Sullivan, and she runs this concert every year at the Lincoln Center. And this particular night was a celebration of Gershwin. And our friend's cabaret artist, Steve Ross, over in New York, who's a wonderfully talented gentleman, has been, played in everywhere from live at the Algonquin to all sorts of places. And he brought us over, and we went over there, and it was fantastic because Gershwin and New York just fit like a glove, don't they? It's just his harmony is so connected with that city, I think.
Yeah, incredible, absolutely amazing.
But
I want to get into one more thing actually before we go. Sure. Is I know that you joined the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra as assistant music director, and pianist, which is incredible for the Elvis Presley "If I Can Dream" UK Arena tour. Yeah, and obviously Memphis Symphony Orchestra too. I mean, what was that like to work on such a big project like that?
Well, that was sort of an extension of the album that we made, really. Yeah. Because the If I Can Dream album was a very successful album in the UK. I mean, it did well in other parts of the world, but in the UK, I think it was like the biggest selling album of 2015, I think it was, by a non-UK artist. I think we were, I think Coldplay beat us to it. So we were not, I think we were number 2 in the overall charts. But
amazing.
But it was and also with that album, there was no precedent. It was the first time anything like this had been done on this scale with an artist that was so iconic. So it was recorded with Sony, and before we made the album, we had to go in, I think it was about a year earlier, and we did 3 demo tracks. I think we did Bridge Over Troubled Water, It's Now or Never, and Burning Love, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And Robin Smith, who is a very talented orchestrator and arranger, did these sort of very fast. I don't know if you ever heard sort of Louis Clark's arrangements for the Electric Light Orchestra. And he did it, and it was all this very fast semi-quaver passages for the violins, and and all this sort of adrenaline running through the arrangement. And he did this arrangement, and we had to have these 3, I suppose you could call them pilot tracks or demo tracks, to prove to Sony that this concept was going to work. And we then had Priscilla Presley's blessing as well, and Graceland's blessing. I saw. So we then went out to make the album. So when we finished the album, it did so well that Danny Batesh at Kennedy Street, who's a promoter in the UK, took it out on tour. And we did all the big arenas around the UK. We did Manchester, the O2, Cardiff, and all the sort of arenas, and we went out with the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra. Wow. And at that stage, I don't think I wasn't assistant musical director on that tour. I just played piano on that tour. But I suppose my role sort of grew as the tours went on. I think we've done now 7 tours, and Robin and I have done them all. Mm-hmm. We've done 2 tours in Europe, around Europe. We've done 3 in the UK, and we've done a couple in America as well. Yeah. And the American tour, which I think was about 3 or 4 years ago, was to mark the 40th anniversary of Elvis's death. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing because that was in Memphis. That was at the FedEx Forum in Memphis, and oh my gosh, it was almost like a pilgrimage in terms of the fans. They came, and it was so emotional. The emotion coming off the audience was really quite amazing, and also very interesting to see in the States how his legacy has been remembered in different parts. So when you go to New York or some of those more northern states, it's less, it's still amazing, but it's not as passionate, I would say, as, when you go down south. But the 40th anniversary was amazing. And obviously having Priscilla on tour with us is incredible as well. And she's so lovely and, so inspiring about and talks about Elvis with such love, both on and off the stage. It's not, there's no pretense, there's no act there. It's, what you see is what you get from her. And she's just a lovely, pleasant energy to be around.
That's incredible. I know that your last performance was actually at Graceland. I mean, what was that like to perform there as well at the end?
amazing. And we did our rehearsals there as well.
Wow.
And that was where all the rehearsals took place. They've got this incredible function room. Well, it's not. It's more of a exhibition hall than a function room. It's great. Amazing to be there. And I sort of, on my day off, I became very much the Elvis tourist and went round the house and went round the exhibits and everything. And Graceland was an amazing place to be, and the energy was really quite incredible. So
I can imagine. Was it like a very surreal feeling as well, walking around Graceland and the house as well, and even just working with Priscilla as well? Was it like a very surreal feeling for you?
It was, and also because I'd done the record so closely before, it was, having had access to these multi-tracks and heard Elvis talking in the studio with his other musicians, things that you would never hear on a released recording. That made it, I felt very connected almost, because, whenever I do a record, I want to know about the artist and what was their process and how was that, how did they relay what they wanted to their musicians, and so that was very interesting for me. But just being around the memorabilia was incredible, and everyone that worked there was a wonderful guy there called Gary. I don't think he works there anymore, but he was so helpful. A wonderful experience. They really, really looked after us and made us feel very welcome and at home.
That is brilliant, and that is the perfect way to finish the podcast. But I want to say thank you so much for today. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And how have you been through the last few? Have you been doing a lot of these podcasts over the last few weeks and months?
Yeah, busy. This is episode 78 now, so I've done a lot now. So I've been teaching as well, running my own orchestra too. So I've been really busy and okay. So thank you so much. But
brilliant. But really, I've enjoyed watching a lot of them. So
yeah.
Thank you for bringing them to us.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you as well. But how can people find you online as well, just in case?
So I'm very active on my social media. So Dominic Ferris Music is my Instagram and my Facebook page. And my website is dominicferris.com. Hopefully we'll see some more live shows creeping in there as the months go by.
Definitely.
But that's how you can check out what I'm doing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dominic. That's the end of the episode. Everyone, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.